Welcome to Discover Barnstable, the official podcast of the town of Barnstable, a podcast where you can meet the people who steward the programs and services that connect us to our quality of life here in the town of Barnstable. We invite you to join the conversation as we navigate municipal government and our community pathways to help you discover Barnstable. I'm Lynn Poyant, and on this episode of Discover Barnstable, we are joined by the town's award-winning finance director, Mark Milne. Mark has been the Director of Finance for the Town of Barnstable for the past 25 years, and prior to his career in public finance, he spent several years working in the public accounting profession and is a licensed CPA in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We will be talking to Mark about capital improvement plans. Welcome, Mark.
Good morning, Lynn. Thank you for having me.
We're very glad to have you back. A while back, you did Budgeting 101 with us,
Yes.
and that is still, I think, to this day, the most, after Beach Stickers, the most popular podcast that we've had. So I think it's wonderful that you are able to explain things in a really understandable way in bite-sized chunks. Mm-hmm. So today we're going to be talking about the capital improvement plan and why it's important for communities to have a 5-year capital improvement plan.
Sure. These plans typically include very large expenditures. They can have impact on the community's future growth, impact on service levels. They don't necessarily repeat themselves year after year, so the consequences of a mistake could be much more severe. And so, you really need to understand what the community's future growth looks like and how we're going to meet those services and what kind of capital investment we'll need to make to meet that.
And what process does Barnstable follow to review and evaluate capital project submissions and decide which projects are going to be funded through the budget?
Sure. We're just starting the process for this year, a matter of fact, and departments are working on submissions. Every department identifies what their needs are, and we ask them to try to do that over a 5-year period because we want to be able to plan appropriately to essentially accumulate the funding to try to address as much of that as we possibly can. So they go through, they identify their needs, they provide submissions to us, and then we go through an evaluative process that includes a task force that's created of every department head essentially in town. And the task force will meet collectively all day to evaluate the submissions, mostly just the submissions of the immediate fiscal year that people are asking for. And we try to prioritize those. We have 4 different criteria that we use to prioritize those projects. The first one being whether or not it's imperative. Is there by not doing this project, will we create an immediate harmful impact or avoid a significant public safety issue? The second category is essential. And then we'll have important projects and then desirable projects. So we basically rank the projects in those 4 different categories to identify really the imperative and the essential ones that should first and foremost be funded. Because we don't have necessarily all the money in the world to do every single project that gets submitted, so we have to go through that ranking process.
And I have to say that when I was the Director of Community Services and the field study was done, there was like a 20-year plan because all the field needs couldn't be addressed in 1 year.
Absolutely, yeah, it's similar. I mean, our buildings, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't stop there, though. After that process is done, the task force goes back and they look at that ranking, and then they go through a second evaluation phase. And there are 10 criteria that they look at that are kind of aligned with the town council strategic plan. And they score the projects in those 10 different categories to try to find the ones that are mostly linked to the town council strategic plan and ultimately to help preserve and improve the quality of life in our town, which is overall our mission. And then we also have a comprehensive financial advisory committee that will meet with the departments, go over their submissions, and they don't have any power or any authority to develop the capital plan that's brought forward ultimately, but they'll advise the town management and town council as to issues or matters that they feel are important for us to consider in deciding what we should bring forward.
And I remember when we were doing different things with regards to the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, the CFAC, the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee, was instrumental in providing feedback on things. And having that kind of input from a citizen group is really useful.
It's a good perspective to have. You want to have somebody from the citizens' perspective taking a look at what we're doing as well. We just don't want it all to happen in town hall. It's nice to have an outside view.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about capital, there's operating capital that is part of the operating budget. And what's that threshold that a project would actually go to the capital improvements plan?
It's the threshold's $50,000. Anything over $50,000, we ask people to submit those through the capital program as opposed to the operating budget. And operating capital is really more things like routine vehicle replacement. We see that in our public works department and our police department because they have a fleet of vehicles and equipment that need to routinely be replaced. So that's more of your operating type capital.
Okay. And how does the town go about financing its capital projects?
So financing is a mixed bag. I mean, we have cash reserves. After evaluating, how much we need to keep aside in our cash reserves to cover any, our risk tolerance and various things like what assets are we going to self-insure ourselves for, what type of operations are we going to provide funding with from free cash, and then which will allow us to determine what we have left over to help finance the capital program. So we have some cash that we'll use. Always chasing grants. Grants are a big one when it comes to capital items. Capital grants are, out there from many different agencies, federal and state, and departments are constantly researching and applying for grants to help offset our capital expenditures. And then probably the biggest financing component is we borrow. We borrow money. We go to the municipal bond market. For example, every year we're issuing a bond or a loan to finance much of our capital program because, again, these are large expenditures that you can't include them in the operating budget because they'll make the operating budget increases and decreases fluctuate wildly. So you want to finance them through a capital program, but you have to borrow the money to finance these things. But then the loan payback subsequently becomes part of the operating budget. That we have to plan for. So that's a very important evaluation that you have to make when you're developing a capital plan is what's the future operating budget impact if I do this project, because I got to go probably take a loan out to finance it. But we don't just finance through the municipal bond market. We'll also borrow money from the State Revolving Loan Fund or the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust for mainly our drinking water and clean water or sewer projects. They're available for financing through that program at much more favorable interest rates than what the municipal bond market will bring. And oftentimes we can qualify, sometimes for subsidies on those projects as well. So those are the main sources, cash grants and financing through either the municipal bond market or the State Revolving Loan Fund. And
I have to say that our treasurer over the years has been really done a phenomenal job with regards to the borrowings that we've had, and there have been some refinancings that have saved the town millions of dollars because projects have been able to be refinanced.
Yeah, that hasn't happened in a while because we've been borrowing for a number of years at very favorable interest rates, just because that's the way the market has trended. But that's reversing itself right now. Interest rates are increasing dramatically as a result of what's happening at the federal level, and we're starting to see, loans that we would take a 20-year loan out at 1.2% a couple of years ago. We're over 4% now, and so these refinancing opportunities could present themselves again in the future once interest rates start going back down. So if we borrow money at 4% this year, and 3 years from now, financing rates have dropped significantly again, like they did previously, there could be a refinancing opportunity, just like you or I would do with your mortgage.
Right. And what are the largest components of the town's capital plan?
So the biggest components, of course, are infrastructure associated with drinking water and clean water or sewers. I mean, those are probably the largest need that we have looking forward, because protecting water resources for our community is the most important. It's the most important vital asset that we have. It's why people come here, visitors from all over the world. We need to protect those resources because it drives our economy, it drives our labor force, it keeps our property values where they are. And if we lose that, it's not going to be good for anybody. And we need clean drinking water for our residents and visitors as well. So that's probably the largest part of the capital program, but there are also other important pieces. Our road infrastructure is very large. I think we have the fourth largest road infrastructure in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Yeah. So we spend a lot of money every year maintaining our public road infrastructure, and we have a lot of private ways. And as you know, we've been looking at taking more of those private ways potentially in the future and making those part of our inventory, and then we'll have to maintain those and make periodically capital improvements to those roadways.
And I have to say that that's been a town council discussion. There have been a couple of private road workshops with the town manager, legal department, discussing that
Absolutely.
very thing.
Yeah.
Because there is a high dollar value to it.
Absolutely, yeah. And as we build out the public sewer system, many of those sewer lines are going to go into these private ways, and at that point in time, we'll have to decide, well, if we're going to, since we put the sewer line in and improve that roadway, maybe we should just take it into our inventory at that point in time. Now that it meets public road standards, and we want to make sure that it stays in public road standards. But the other area that we're is a major component of the capital program is our facilities. We have a lot of square footage in town, buildings, mostly schools, and those require periodically capital investments. You have to replace those rooftop ventilators on top of the schools. You have to replace roofs and windows and doors and flooring and so forth, because these facilities are used very heavily, throughout the year. And so it's just like your home. You periodically have to do those capital improvements with a new furnace or a new roof or something, and we're in the same predicament. And I think finally the other piece, it's kind of unique, is the airport. We have an airport here in town, very large infrastructure associated with that airport, but most of that gets financed through grants through the Federal Aviation Administration and Mass Department of Transportation.
I am glad you mentioned that. And a while back, there were a number of parcels or buildings within town that were at 50 years old, and they needed to be replaced. One of them was the airport. Another one was the Kennedy Rink, which is now the Hyannis Youth and Community Center. And so there's only so much maintenance with some of these, right, because of the complex systems that they have to them. Right. So, thank you for mentioning that. Sure. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Oh, I think we've covered it all.
All right. Well, that sounds great. So we're going to ask you a bonus question.
Okay.
If I were to look at your Spotify playlist, what would be on top?
Probably a lot of old 60s, 70s, and 80s classic rock. My wife says I'm living in a different era. I got to update my playlist, but I'm just an old fan of that music from that time, from that era. And my kids are too. It's kind of funny because they listen to the same type of music sometimes, and they really like it. And I think it's best music in our lifetime.
There you go. And it's a shared experience for them. So that's great. So thank you so much for coming back to the studio with us, Mark. I know that we're going to be having you back again because the finances of the town are so important, as is referenced in the town council strategic plan. It's what holds everything together for the town's quality of life.
Yes, thanks.
So thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
And thank you, our listeners, for spending time with us and listening to Discover Barnstable, the official podcast of the town of Barnstable. We hope you found a new understanding of how your municipal government works for you and our community. Be sure to drop us a line at podcast@town.barnstable.ma.us and let us know what you would like to learn next. Until then, Go Discover Barnstable.